بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ومن والاه. Using fertilized ova for research. So it is permissible to use frozen embryos in research and experiments according to the most correct jurisdiction. This opinion was adopted by the Islamic High Council of the World Muslim League and by a majority vote of the Islamic Organization of Medical Sciences in it is permissible to obtain stem cells to grow them and use them with the goal of medical treatment or for permissible scientific research, provided that their source is halal. For example, any surplus zygotes remaining from the in vitro fertilization, if they're donated by the parents, it should be ascertained, it should be sure that they will not be used to initiate a pregnancy that would be Islamically permitted, right? But like always, there are some conditions, six in this case, which are necessary for its permissibility. So first is that scientific research must be consistent with the higher objectives of the Sharia. Hence, it is not permissible to carry out experiments whose intent is to change the nature created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor to exploit science for evil or corruption. So experimenting on, for example, changing the color of the eyes of the genes or its hair color, for example, and things like that, just to make something more appealing and beautiful. That would be something which is not really according to the higher objectives of Sharia. But maybe if the research involves around trying to find solutions to genetic diseases, that actually would be in accordance to the higher objectives. Second condition, the goal of research should be to achieve Islamically legitimate interests that are essential for strong needs, not merely embellishments. Same example as just mentioned. Hence, the goal of research on embryos should not be merely to produce cosmetics, for example. Number three, there must be no other alternative to using the fertilized ova to conduct the research to achieve the desired benefit. And this kind of condition might just make the use of zygotes and embryos impermissible. But it's hard to determine whether or not uh, it could be used for any type of research except that which is genetic in nature. Condition number three, there must be no. Oh, condition number four, the fertilized ova used in scientific research must not subsequently be transferred to a uterus because we don't know what might changes a person might have done to the gene. And we know that the real khalqillah, changing the khalq, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is impermissible. So once you experiment on the fertilized ova, you might have changed its essence and its khalq, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended. So purposefully bringing this to life would be akin to the real khalq. Is not possible. Condition number five, the spouses must give explicit consent because it is the genetic material after all. And lastly, number six, the relevant authorities must give consent and the experiments must be conducted under their supervision in order to ensure the above conditions are fulfilled. And the relevant authorities would be medical authorities who know how to take care of the procedure and also uh, legal IFTA and FIC authorities to ensure that conditions mentioned or any other things that relate to Islamic jurisprudence, they're all fulfilled. Now, these are the conditions for the permissibility of experimenting with fertilized. ovaries. What is the evidence to support such things? Well, the evidence for the permissibility to carry out such experiments on the fertilized ova. Uh, Number one, the research and experiments on fertilized ova are not being carried out on a fetus or a human, but merely on a collection of cells. There are many benefits resulting from research and experiments on fertilized ova, including giving the chance to people to have offspring, and those who are infertile. Maybe you can find solutions of finding ways to make them fertile again. A lot. Determining the strength or weakness of the sperm to fertilize. Identifying the factors that lead to fertilized ovum to either attach to the wall of the uterus or not. The life of these fertilized ova is not considered expendable in service of the breeding interest, and they only acquire the dignity of human life after ensoulment. Now, this point is actually quite debatable because according to the majority of the fuqaha, uh, birth begins with fertilization. So once the ova is fertilized and turns into a zygote, that's it. That thing has value. Maybe not the same as an actual human, but for the majority, you can't actually get rid of it from your body once it's there, right? Uh, so you have to be careful. And the question would remain, is a fertilized ova the same as a zygote, or does it take some time for it to develop into one? Depending on that, the strength of the evidence can judge the fact against. Item Hukum number three is that there are only two possibilities for the fate of surplus fertilized ova. A, they're either left in the test tube to grow and then end up being discarded because the maximum recorded lifetime in the test tube is 16 days. Or B, they are frozen and kept for further research and experiments. So in either case, the eventual outcome is that they perish. And the second situation seems preferable because of the consummate benefits, right? You don't know when you're going to need for research, you might as well store it for the appropriate time. Allahu alam bisalam. So that was on research on fertilized oat. Now let's talk about a very important issue, that is abortion. So I alluded towards one aspect of abortion that according to the majority, it is not permissible to go through with this act, right? Except in very rare conditions. The most flexible in this regard is the madhab of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, but it's not what most people would think, right? So for this first kind of abortion, a spontaneous abortion, and it occurs without the violation or external intervention. And ruling of permissibility or prohibition here is not applicable because there's no human action involved. The fetus dies on its own, right? So because there's no deliberate intention, human action involved, um, there's no accountability. Um, Then you have the elective abortion for moral reasons, right? So, for example, purposefully abort, and due to reasons, for example, if someone committed unlawful sexual intercourse, or maybe it was a case of rape, right? So these are two possible moral reasons why one would abort such a fetus. So let's talk about zina to begin with. So there's a consensus among Islamic jurists that if the fetus is being sold, abortion is not permissible as long as the mother's life is not in danger, because the fetus has become a human with a soul, and it has all the rights and duties that a living human enjoys. So installment is considered 4 months into the birth process, or if before 4 months and signs of life medically are achieved, like the fetus has a beating heartbeat, etc., then it'll also be considered as being installed. Generally, we hear that it's 4 months, but 4 months is like the maximum upper limit. At 4 months, we'll consider it being alive, but even before 4 months, if medically we see that it has signs of life, then it's going to be considered as if the soul has been breathed into, right? However, if the fetus is not ensouled, the jurors differ whether abortion is permissible or prohibited. And the most cautionary view is obviously as follows. The afflicted woman is known for her righteousness and chastity, and the pregnancy is in its first 40 days. Then there is no objection to an abortion, and it helps her to maintain her chastity and honor, conceals her indiscretion, and protects her, facilitates her repentance. But if the pregnancy is beyond the first 40 days, right, and this is the time when the fetus's features start to form, or if the woman is known to be promiscuous, then prohibition of abortion is what is most compatible with the objectives of Sharia, uh, which calls for blocking the means of immorality and preserving human life. So if you just allow it mutlaqan open, then someone who's used to doing this stuff might end up doing it again, right? So you need to put a stop to that as well. Second problem we have is rape. So there's consensus among the jurists that abortion is not permissible if the fetus is ensouled, as long as the mother's life is not endangered. So that's like a fixed issue over there. Also, there is no disagreement among the jurists that if the pregnancy is in the first 40 days, abortion is permissible, right? This is a case of necessity or near necessity, and the Sharia maxim stipulates al-mahdurat al-zarurat tubih al-mahdurat, that necessity renders prohibited matters permissible. Harm must be eliminated, right? So these maxims tell us that uh, within the first 40 days, abortion would be permissible because this is going to be a zarar for the mother to be. If pregnancy continues, the woman may suffer from physiological and psychological ailments in her life and may even be endangered, right? We know the stigma in society, and our society's communities can be very unforgiving, even if it was no fault of the woman at all, like in the case of the rape. But the kind of stigma that is attached to it and the kind of shame that it brings in kind of justifies something like Jurists of the Hanafi school of jurisprudence have listed reasons for abortion that are less serious than the above mentioned, such as the likelihood of the mother's inability to breastfeed the child, right? And if that is allowed, then something which is much more would also be allowed. Rule number two, if the embryo has passed the first 40 days since conception, but is still not consoled, if the negative consequences of the rape can be alleviated by changing the woman's environment. So you put her somewhere where people don't know her, so she won't be judged. People think that's some actual baby. Where you have a socially supportive environment, for example. People are not judgmental, right? They're compassionate about her condition, stuff like that. Then it's not appropriate in such cases to allow for abortion, right? because if she's given an environment where she can handle the problem that she's faced with, then why waste her life, right? And however, if she's not capable of bearing the consequences, such that she would suffer from psychological or physical harm, if she does not abort, then abortion is permissible for the following reasons. The raped woman played no part in this sin or crime. So if it is possible to alleviate her condition by abortion before the installment of the embryo, then it should be replaced. This is a case of necessity, as we've mentioned, so it is grounds for abortion. Other instances of sexual intercourse that happen without the woman's consent take the same meaning as that of uh, these include a man having unlawful intercourse with her while she is sleeping or under anesthesia or the like. This is obviously all falling in the category of zina, unlawful intercourse, right? Then there's this whole concept of marital rape. So we need to understand that as well. So first of all, does such a concept exist within the Islamic framework? The short answer to that is no, that there is no such thing as marital rape, right? Uh, because once you're married, it is lawful for the spouses to have intercourse with each other. And rape applies, Sharan speaking, an aspect of unlawfulness to it. So it's unlawful intercourse done without the woman's consent, that is rape. Now, marital rape is something that the husband forces himself on the wife while she is not ready to give consent. Mm. So, to what extent does the woman have to say no? And how should the spouses actually navigate this situation? Well, the optimal, which I think is very obvious, is that it should be mutually consent, that the woman should be both physically and psychologically ready at the time. Uh, if you're married or if you know someone you married, then these situations happen to occur. And sometimes the wife has the need, but the husband's really tired, or maybe he's having a bad day, so he's not up for it. Or it could be the other way around. The husband's really in need, but the wife had some situation in which she's not feeling it, where she's tired. Then the best approach is for them to just talk their feelings out and respectfully choose another moment. Um, But if the need is really strong, sometimes it might happen. It's so strong that the other person is literally wasting away in the sense that they're not going to get their night's sleep because they just can't because of the high level of shahwa and desire which is there. So in those cases, the other spouse should not object to it, right? And if somehow the other pushes them and presses them and kind of forces them into doing it, uh, there's no foul on them because they're actually, first of all, indulging in something which Allah has made halal for them. And second of all, they're doing so in order to avoid being propelled into sin, right? And for these reasons, it would be generally okay. You're obviously you're not allowed to harm the other party in any way, but if the way you conduct the situation is that which falls in the norm, except for the fact that your partner is not ready or even feeling for it, That's not ground to call it illegal or something like that. Hello, I'm So the whole concept of marital rape is uh, the same way as the West sees it is not something that is acceptable for us. And that's number one. Number two is a kind of marital rape would be, for example, if a woman is genuinely sick, right? So medically, she should not be doing this, or she's unable to do this, or maybe she is in her monthly periods. And in those cases, the husband is forcing himself upon her, then this would constitute as medical rape, because in this area, the husband is actually exceeding the boundaries that the Sharia has prescribed. Acts of uh, Then we have a discussion on elective abortion for medical reasons. And there are two possible scenarios. One is to prevent the illness or death of the mother. So abortion in this case may be indicated on either preventative or therapeutic grounds. What do we mean by these terms? By preventative, we mean that the pregnant woman has no immediate danger to her health, but the doctor predicts a medical danger based on objective evidence. Therapeutic grounds would be if there is already a medical danger to the woman, which can only be resolved through abortion. Okay? So the ruling in this case is dependent on the age of the fetus. If the fetus is in the pre-insolvent stage, which is 120 days, before 120 days, or like I mentioned before, the signs of life start to appear, then abortion is permissible if the life of the mother is dependent on this, whether it be for their preventative reasons or therapeutic reasons. Some fuqaha have stipulated that abortion in this case might even be obligatory, might even be false. And they reason as follows. So firstly, you have the general maxim of Sharia calling for eliminating all harm, such as in the case of two harms, the great harm should be eliminated, applying the lesser harm. And therefore, safeguarding the life of the mother is more important because it is observable by the naked eye, right? Than protecting an inanimate fetus that has not yet been solved. Number two, the jurists of the Hanafi school of jurisprudence have permitted abortion of the fetus before installment due to a valid excuse, such as a lack of wet nurse, right? So you don't have someone who can breastfeed the child. How is the child going to live? The mother is incapable for some reason, and you don't have alternatives for that. So the Hanafi school of jurisprudence has given us permission for that. Hence, permitting abortion to save the mother's life seems more justified. Third reason, the mother has rights and duties as an autonomous person, and therefore the mother should not sacrifice to preserve a fetus that is not yet an autonomous person and doesn't have any rights, right? But obviously, this permission for abortion has some stipulations to it. Number one, that there must be a real danger to the mother's life if the fetus is not aborted, not just some assumed uh, danger. Number two, the threat to the mother's life established by the testimony of two trustworthy specialist doctors. And the same hierarchy as we mentioned before, Muslim, Muslim عادل, if not that possible, then غير مسلم عادل, then Muslim, then غير Muslim. Muslim. Number three, the danger to the mother's life is related to leaving the fetus in her uterus. And number four, abortion must be the only possible treatment for the mother. So there's no meds, no other procedure, only abortion that is going to save her life. Then it may be justifiable. So that was Condition number one, that is before the pre-insolvent age. Number two is if the fetus is in the post-insolvent stage, 120 days or we see signs of life. Then there are two opinions among jurists. The first opinion that is abortion is impermissible after the insolvent, even if it leads to the death of the mother. And number two, that it is permissible if it is the only way to save the mother's life. And the Majma, the authors of this book, they think that this is the more preferable opinion, and they state the evidence as follows. First, we always take the legal maxims into account. And the thing about legal maxims is these aren't human creations. Rather, they are supported by numerous hadith and Quranic verses. We just extract a maxim from those multiple nusus, multiple legal texts, and present it in a more applicable format that we know as al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya, fit legal maxims. Okay? So severe harm is removed by lesser harm, and when one of two harms is inevitable, the lesser harm should be selected. So the mother's death is considered a greater harm than the fetus's death because the impact on her husband, any children that they previously have, or other family members would be much more in the case that the mother is lost rather than the unborn or newborn fetus. Moreover, certainty takes priority over speculation. اليقين فوق الظن. And hence, it is certain that the mother's life is in danger, right? And that must be at the beginning. And that takes priority over the speculative future of the life of the fetus. What if in the death of the mother, the fetus doesn't survive? It's probably going to go to the ICU, right? Uh, or maybe just you might not find someone who can breastfeed fetus. And there's so many other more reasons which, you can think of as if and why the fetus's life might be in danger post-birth, right? Another Sharia maxim involved is that al-mashaqqatu tajlibu ad-taysir. Hardship begets ease. Hardship begets ease. So for the family, the hardship resulting from the mother's death is greater than the loss of a fetus that may cause the death of both itself and the mother sooner or later. Hence, the hardship which would arise from the mother's death can be eased by abortion in this case. But again, we have some stipulations for this aforementioned abortion as well. The same four conditions that were mentioned in the previous section or the previous syllable. So that is reason number one on medical grounds why someone would want to abort is if the mother's life is in danger. Number two is fear of abnormalities, disease, or death for the fetus, right? So there are three possible cases. Number A, congenital abnormalities in the fetus, like the genetic kind of abnormalities for the fetus. For example, take Down syndrome. So if the abnormalities are discovered prior to the installment, abortion is permissible if they're confirmed to be severe. Again, the same maxim applies that the lesser of two harms is selected, and the abortion of fetus is lesser harm because the birth of a severely deformed child entails harm to the child, the family, the wider society. Accordingly, the lesser harm, that is abortion of fetus, is selected in order to ward off the greater evil, i.e., the harms that are going to come to the family and the society. But if the abnormalities are discovered after ensoulment, then aborting the fetus isn't permissible based on the following pieces of evidence. First, the general evidence that it is permissible to kill human beings without a legitimate cause. And baby deformed, yes, it will make your life difficult, but not impossible, nor is it endangering human beings. Secondly, the unanimous agreement of the scholars on the prohibition of abortion after. Scenario number two is the mother having transmitted a disease to the fetus. So abortion is not permissible if the fetus is already consoled at the time of the disease. Then it is as follows again, because abortion is tantamount to killing a soul without legitimate cause, so it is more maybe to get the same penalty as if you murdered a full-grown human being, but it still has uh, gravity to the nature of the act itself. Two, it is difficult to verify that the fetus has been affected with the disease. From experience, we find that in many such cases, it later transpires that the fetus was actually not affected. So whatever you're seeing through those screens, ultrasounds, might not be 100%. So there's always a chance it might be wrong. So just on the assumption that the child might have contracted a disease from the mother, you're not allowed to kill a living thing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was shafi. It's very much possible that he might cure that living being. So there's no point in taking its life. And lastly, no scholar has deemed it permissible to kill the diseased mother due to a terminal illness. Hence, it's less justified to kill a fetus whose illness is not even proven, right? So mercy killings and for terminal in patients, that's not permissible, right? So similarly, for the fetus would not be permissible either. Then again, if this is happening before ensoulment, and it is possible to detect the transmission of the disease to the fetus within the first 40 days before any body parts start to take shape, then abortion is permissible because the organogenesis, the formation of the organs for the fetus, is still incomplete. We should also take into consideration the opinion of those jurists who permit abortion at this stage, even without a reason, right? Just for the mind that continuation might be harmful for women. That for those jurists is grounds enough to justify abortion. However, once the fetus becomes fully formed, its right to live must not be fortified merely on account of the possibility of disease. Moreover, the likelihood of the fetus catching the disease from its mother is low, and very low in fact, and can even be reduced further by a C-section delivery. For many of the infections occur when the fetus is delivered vaginally. Now, not saying that's not true, but the fact is a C-section delivery severely compromises the child's immune system, right? Because we human beings are more bacteria than we are human. So the number of bacteria and the number of germs that are on our body, not bacteria, it's germs. The number of germs on our body are much more than the number of cells that we have in our bodies, right? And when the child passes through the vagina, normal delivery, a lot of those germs, they come onto the child, right? Which helps build him or her uh, their immunity. So that is why when a C-section happens, a lot of those immunity germs are attached to the child, which then lowers their overall immunity to begin with. So that is one problem worth considering. So though infections can occur when delivered vaginally, um, the question is, are there not medications in place which would allow for such a thing to be cured? We do not have a cure for this yet, right? So it's kind of actually difficult to actually where to put uh, this in its permissibility, impermissibility, or right? Third scenario is feared or confirmed fetal death. There are two scenarios to that. So scenario C1 is that a pregnant woman dies with a living fetus in the womb. The preferable opinion is that surgically open the abdomen and rescue the unborn child. The evidence is obviously as follows that the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, من قتل نفسا بغير نفس فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. That's one verse. Whoever kills someone, whoever kills a soul as if he has killed the entire humanity, whoever saves a soul is as if they have saved entire humanity. Right? So you can possibly save the fetus, then it is okay. Second is if you leave the fetus to die after the mother's death, in spite of being able to save it, it is tantamount to killing an innocent soul. Accordingly, making an incision in the mother's abdomen to save the life of her child becomes necessary. As the Sharia maxim states, when there is a trade-off between two evils, the remedy of the greater is sought by doing the lesser evil. And that is the evil of making an incision in the abdomen of the dead mother. It is much less than the evil of letting the child die inside her womb. But there are two stipulations for this permissibility. Number one, it is more likely than not that the fetus will live after the mother's death. There's a chance he's going to survive. Secondly, the age of the fetus is declared by trustworthy doctors to be such that it is expected to survive if taken out of its mother's abdomen. Scenario C2 is that the fetus dies in the womb of its mother as a result of a disease or an assault. In this case, it is permissible to abort the fetus. However, the preference is to carry out the abortion without surgery, without cutting up the fetus inside the uterus. The reason being, leaving the fetus inside the uterus is harmful to the mother, and harm, as we know, must be eliminated according to the Sharia. Moreover, leaving the dead fetus in the womb might prevent her from becoming pregnant again, and if she had been divorced, then her waiting period would unnecessarily be prolonged. Right? Because the idda period for a pregnant woman is until she delivers the baby. So if the fetus is dead, then you might as well just remove it and let that woman alleviate from both the pains of loss of marriage, if the marriage wasn't totally toxic, and then the loss of a child. Reason number two, taking the dead fetus out is an aspect of medical treatment, right? Because if you leave it long enough, it can contract other diseases and problems. And as we've established at the beginning of this book, that taking medicine and medical procedures for health purposes is something encouraged in Islam. Allahu Alam bisawab, and that was discussion on abortion. Now, there's a very good book that discusses these topics. It talks about child control, birth control, topics about different forms of being inseminated, with topic on abortion and stuff like that. Is a book by Mufti Muhammad ibn Adam Tawfiri in the UK. It's a very small book, about maybe 40 pages or something, published by the White Red Press. Uh, I remember the book's name is Birth Control and Abortion in Islam. Yeah, that's it. Birth Control and Abortion in Islam. It's about 40 pages. Discusses quite a lot of few things. It talks about contraception, reversible, irreversible, describes the different forms of reversible contraception, and opinion of the four schools of law, the reasons why people do that, and hukum on each of those reasons. Then talk about abortion, the rules of abortion before 4 months, after 4 months, abortion in case of need that affect the mother, the child, in case of adultery, rape, and the role of doctors and medical practitioners when it comes to it. We've covered a lot, alhamdulillah, in this text as well. But if you want to explore further this topic, that is a good resource to consider, inshallah. Our next discussion is on sex selection. So, what sex selection refers to are actions and procedures that are undertaken with the goal of choosing the sex of the fetus as male or female. Right? So, the methods used for this can be classified into natural, non-medical, and medical procedures. Natural methods. These methods include following a certain dietary regimen and chemical douche. The chemical douche method is based on empirical studies that an acidic vaginal environment is more conducive to X-bearing sperm, female producing sperm, whereas an alkaline pH is more favorable to a Y-bearing sperm. Therefore, some women use an acidic or alkaline vaginal douche in an attempt to prepare the uterus with the pH appropriate to the desired gender. In addition to the timing the intercourse with respect to ovulation, such methods are permissible and unobjectable because there are means by which to attain an objective that is essentially permissible. Then, if you go into the old woman's wisdom, you find more such treatments over there. For example, uh, eating lots of bananas results in the birth of boys. That is something that I just came across. It wasn't from a medical profession. It was just in some kind of bayan, which I heard. But bananas with boys, Allahu A'lam. And you'll find other things like that as well. Second, we have medical methods. The common amongst these medical methods of sex selection is usually to seek or fertilize the ovum with sperm carrying the desired gender. So you're not doing it naturally, you're probably doing it in a test tube where you can first study what kind of sperm you're taking and then insert it into the ovum, right? Because ultimately it comes down to the sperm. Because we know that the chromosomes for the ovum are XX, they're constant. And the chromosome for the sperm is XX or XY. So depending on which one it is, results in the gender of the child. And so in a lot of societies, where women are blamed for giving birth to a baby girl, like kind of case in pre-Islam Arabia and a lot of these rural areas as well, right? So seriously, if anyone's at the fault, it is the father and the husband. The wife, the mother, he had no role in this at all. I know why she's playing Allahu Alam. Thailand, it's not in everybody, anyone's control, so no one is to be blamed, Sharon speaking, morals speaking. But if you really want to blame someone, then blame the father and not the mother. So you basically select which sperm is going to fertilize the ovum. Now, there is techniques for such sperm sorting, including density gradient centrifugation and electrostatic sorting. Different medical techniques in how you sort sperm to figure out which is XX, which is XY. So contemporary Islamic jurists disagree regarding the permissibility of such methods. Some allow this, and others don't. Those who allow it do so if measures are taken to avoid mixing of lineages, conditions that we discussed previously when talking about in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination. The case of dire need, right? So as not to upset the natural balance of male-female ratio in the population, as dictated by God that women have historically always been more than men. Okay? And so that balance, that ratio, that must not change. Other jurists prohibit these methods except for medical necessity, such as in the case of genetic diseases law. And this latter opinion is more prudent, is more understood, because just trying to decide what the gender of your child should be, question is why would you want to do that? Probably not for medical reasons. Your reasons would be either because you've had too many sons and now you want a daughter, or you have daughters and now you'd like a son. Or maybe you're in a society where daughters are frowned upon, and so you'd rather have a son. And none of these reasons are genuine. They're not medical reasons. They're not kind of religious reasons, right? So shouldn't be allowed. And so the Islamic Fiqh Council, it resolved saying that the International Islamic Fiqh Council reiterates the principle that the Muslims should submit to whatever Allah has decreed and to be content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us, be it a male or a female, and to praise Allah for that because there is blessing in what the Creator chooses. The Quran has criticized the people of Jahiliyyah for not submitting and not being content with a female child. وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُم بِالْأُنثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. And when one of them is informed of the birth of a female, his face becomes dark and he suppresses grief. يَتَوَارَى مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ. He hides himself from the people because of the ill of which he has been informed. Do they keep it in humiliation or bury it in the ground? Unquestionably, evil is what they decide. Nevertheless, there is no objection to one desiring a male or female child, based on the fact that the Quran has indicated some of the prophets supplicating Allah to grant them a male child, like Zakaria alayhi salam. He asked for a male child, so he could take his place in the Buwa and propagate the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's okay to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the gender challenge when Allah might have chosen otherwise. So on this basis, the Islamic Fiqh Council resolves the following. Number one, it is permissible to choose the gender of the fetus by natural methods, such as following a certain diet, chemical douches, and timing intercourse with respect to the time of ovulation, because these are permissible means that do not involve any dangerous element. Number two, no medical intervention to choose the gender of the fetus is permissible except in cases of medical necessity. For genetic diseases which affect males but not females or vice versa, in that case, intervention is permissible within established Sharia parameters. If this decision is based on the opinion of a special committee of specialists comprising no fewer than three trustworthy physicians who unanimously affirm that the case calls for medical intervention in order to protect the fetus against a genetic disease. Furthermore, the medical report should be presented to the proper IFTA council in order to issue the appropriate wording for the particular case. Number three, there's a need to establish bodies that directly and precisely supervise hospitals and medical centers that carry out such operations in Islamic countries in order to prevent any violation of the content of this resolution. The relevant authorities in Islamic countries should issue policies and directives to this end.